at this week and look at, once you're retired, how do you maintain your pot? How do you make sure you can live your lifestyle? But also from getting to retirement, when should people really be planning? Jamie, if I just asked you to kind of...
As you said, if you make the wrong decision, there's kind of no going back on these things.
No, that's it. You've worked your whole life to kind of set yourself up, and if you get it wrong, then you can't really unspill that milk.
The mentality of the government isn't going to look after me, I'm going to have to do it myself, and I think that's a good way of looking at it. Well, and welcome to the latest True Potential Do More With Your Money podcast. It's episode 93. I'm joined by three gentlemen to talk about how to maintain your wealth in retirement. So we've got Jamie Sexton.
Good morning, Greg.
Good morning, Jamie. Phil Elvin.
Good morning, Greg.
And the veteran, that is Jeff Casson. So good morning, gents. We've got an interesting topic, I think, today. We're going to be talking about all things retirement. Obviously, looking around the table, we're hopefully a long way away from retirement age-wise, but...
Although with your veteran comment, I'm maybe a lot closer.
Veteran on the podcast, Jeff, veteran on the podcast. And really, what we've got is a good period of time to get into the ribs of retirement. Obviously, for a lot of people, it's their own personal retirement. They want to, understand it. But I've got some statistics we'll get into later, and a couple of questions to pose to yourselves about your retirement, and also what you see in the wider market. Phil, you look after 800 financial planners or financial advisors, and their day job is to help people retire comfortably. Jamie, you are in your own right a financial advisor and speak with a lot of people, and Jeff, obviously you are the man making people the money to retire early. So we hopefully can work our way around the session. But Jeff, as usual, it's been a very, very busy week. There's been lots of meetings taking place not too far from where you are, and really just have a quick update from yourself, the markets and the like.
No, there's been, as you say, Greg, there's been a lot going on, both in the sort of the political sphere that can influence markets, but also within markets themselves. And I was just talking with the team earlier before coming down, and one of the interesting things this week has been really, we talk about volatility in markets, we talk about how equity markets plunge or move 1 or 2%, but really all of the story over the past 3 to 6 weeks has really been in the bond market, and even more so this week. And from a multi-asset investing perspective, that's really important, the use of credit, the use of sovereign fixed interest within the portfolios. But this week it's really been about the signalling mechanism from central banks and how that has played out into the bond market, particularly the sovereign bond market. So we look at the US, we heard from the Fed this week in terms of their change to their stance on quantitative easing, so tapering back, so reducing their support that they put in place last year. We then moved to the Bank of England yesterday, and a massive surprise to the market plays its way through in sterling. So we see sterling weaker in the day. We see the bond market moving really aggressively in a positive sense, so yields coming in, bond prices rise, so inverse relationship there. But again, it speaks to just really that difficulty with forecasting. The Bank of England really guiding people that inflation's a concern. We've touched on it in these podcasts. Real expectation had built that rates were going to increase yesterday, back up to 25 bips from 10 probably, but it didn't come through. Big surprise for the market. So again, people can't forecast. They're very difficult to forecast. So that, I think, was one thing that's really been focusing our attention. And just to try and put it into context for people, whilst we talk about a basis point move, those moves in the UK market yesterday, very similar to the moves actually we saw in the height of COVID last year, but also what we saw in 2016 when we had the Brexit vote. So really material moves without an external event of sort of those magnitude. I think the other thing that we've been looking at as a team is very much around this ongoing strength in equity markets, the delivery of results from companies. Large proportion of the US companies have now reported, about 80% of them have reported better than people have been expecting. So that's continued to drive that re-rating of equity markets, building on the strength that we saw in October as well. Probably worth noting within that it's very much about the growth, the technology areas of the market delivering well. So there had been an expectation that as we move through the recovery phase, we would start to maybe see some of those companies not do as well. But really what you're seeing is that they work on both sides. You know, we still don't, I don't think many of us have stopped how we shop with Amazon, for example, or online, maybe more generally. Retail sales in the UK, still about 30% of them are online, continues to increase as opposed to decrease. And that's supported a number of those businesses. Advertising as well, for many of the technology business, core part of their earnings. It's just really shifted from those that were advertising from a stay at home. Now it's hotels, leisure, getting the benefit of that coming through. So that's been a real focus of continuing to deliver despite some of those difficult headlines that we've touched upon, rising input costs, inflation, material prices, etc. So a lot going on, and then external to that, obviously closer to home, we've COP21 in Glasgow, lots of different announcements coming out of that. Does it have a direct impact in the here and now on asset markets? No. But does it have an impact over the medium term? Yes. And we'll see how that plays out in terms of what it means for energy, what it means for how the finance system operates. We've heard of a number of initiatives that have been signed and supported there, which will have the potential to change how capital is allocated in the medium to longer term. So yeah, lots going on. And a brief summary there.
As always, Jeff, and I think that's always, for me anyways, on the podcast, it's always a good opportunity to plug the morning markets, because obviously you guys can give a better synopsis in a daily basis.
Well, we'll try to give a better synopsis.
Just shows, Jeff, the importance of having that expertise. I remember you go back not that long ago where you were looking for value in the bond market, and you know, when we were discussing with financial advisors, which would be, actually, would you class bonds as, you know, you typically class bonds as low risk, but because the value you were getting in it, would you class them as a higher risk product? It's interesting just the change of what's happened over that period of time. It's
fascinating when you look at just the end of sort of September, the month of October, how bonds moved and how they've then just moved in this first week of November. And you know, we don't talk about it enough because it's a difficult concept to explain, but the bond market itself sets the rate of interest that is most important for all of us as consumers. So it's a really important aspect of financial markets that, because of its complexity, sort of gets hidden in the back door. It's easier to talk about stock prices going up and down, but actually the bond market is the allocator of capital, if you will. And you know, again, it speaks to active management within a multi-asset construct. When we were seeing yields move out, it was presenting an opportunity. There was some value there. So we did see a number of our managers start to increase their allocation to short-dated gilts, US Treasuries, to benefit from that yield that they were able to pick up. Now, that's come all the way back in, so probably the question now is there still that value, particularly at the short end? So interesting points for us to debate as a team, but also to debate with the managers in the coming round of calls for November.
Absolutely. Well, we'll get on to pensions and retirement and the topic really, gents. And I think we could spend hours, if not days, talking about retirement. I think it's obviously it's what most people think about most of the time, but actually some of the statistics I was looking into says that surprisingly a lot of people bury their head in the sand. But if we just kick off, really, we've got three ways of looking at this. We can look at, once you're retired, how do you maintain your pot? How do you make sure you can live your lifestyle? But also from a getting to retirement, you know, when should people really be planning? Jamie, if I just asked you to kind of kick off, and then Phil maybe add to that, but when should people really be thinking about their retirement?
I think it's an interesting concept with, you know, if you look at pension savings over the last sort of 5 to 6 years and the introduction of auto enrolment, and I think this is one of the key elements of, I think a lot of individuals who are, you know, wrongly understood that they could rely on the state for that. You know, I'd retire to get my state pension, that would be enough to live off, which we know now on average people spend, you know, as a couple, £24,000-25,000 per annum. You know, 2 state pensions is going to give you £6,000-7,000 short of that. So I think, you know, answer your question specifically, Greg, it's realistically it's difficult to start understanding that you should be saving from the start. So as soon as you go into work, putting that a little amount away and actually starting very early on, the effect of compounding can make a huge difference later on. But if you haven't started yet, or you haven't even thought of starting yet, but actually just now's the time to really look at it. And I always say this at every podcast when we talk about planning. It's all about what your goal is and what your objective is. So just have a think about it. It's really difficult. It's really difficult to think, actually, how much do I think I'm going to be spending in 20 or 30 years' time? But actually what you should look to do and go, well, actually, what am I spending now? What will slightly decrease? What will slightly increase? Set a target towards that. And actually, if you look at some of our technology, it'll tell you how much you need to save. Don't be shocked where if it says, actually, you need to put £1,000 a month into that, and you go, well, I can't afford that, so I better not. If you just start now, it gets easier. And I think that's the case. There's no dead set age to say, well, actually, I finished school 80 and go to a job and now I should start saving for a pension. You probably should. But I think it's really about circumstances and understanding what you need and then putting a plan in place.
Yeah. Phil?
I think for the younger listeners or viewers, you've kind of got a little bit of a helping hand with automatic enrolment. I think that's kind of certainly going to help, but I'm mindful that a lot of people, auto enrollments come in later in their lives, as it were. You just got to remember that the average age in the UK that one expects to live to is 81, so you've got a long life to look forward to, but you've got to put money aside for it. You said 25,000, I have 30 written here, so assuming you retire at 55, you're going to need £780,000. Now your state pension will do some of that, and that's to have a decent quality of life. I think if you just rely on a state pension, it's going to be quite a Spartan existence. So anything that you can put away at a given point will help you on that journey. And it's not just pensions, we're focusing on pensions clearly, but there are other products. You as an advisor would probably tell a client, leave the pension all the way until last and use other products like ISAs to get an income first, because they're more flexible. And we won't necessarily go into that now, but there's a lot out there product-wise that you can use and investments that you can use, and we've kind of got that here. And if you put technology over the top of it, then it's a no-brainer. But staying at it as well. I think a lot of people I've spoken to they might have, when they were younger, put money into a pension, and then by the time they come to get a mortgage, they decide to knock their pension contributions on the head because they think it's more important to pay a mortgage. I would counsel that you shouldn't do that. You should always keep going with your pension. It's a slog, but it's a fun slog. It's
a strange one, because I think you still have to, we talk about saving regular, quite often, but you still have to consider that you've only got one life to live. So you have to have that fine balance where you do the things that you want to do, and and you manage that in terms of like sort of going for meals, and Greg will be going to the cinema and things like this, but you still who knows, but you still need to have to balance that life. So I think it's key that you don't just go, well, I'll stick 30% or 40% of my salary away into savings because I know I need to retire it at 84 and I need £780,000. You've got to get that balance right of saying that you still have a life to live, and I think that's an important area to consider when you're just thinking about that.
I think the other thing that is important to consider is that we talk about and we think that the state pension will always be there, and there's probably an argument that one can construct that it might not be there. So I think a lot of it is about how we take control, and we do that ourselves, and we automatically start to take more control of our savings.
If you think about how the state pension is actually funded at the minute, you kind of think, oh, there must be a big pot of money that the government's been saving for so many years to pay for your pension, when the reality is it's not. Our NI and national insurance contributions that's going in is paying for that future. So you don't know the construct a government could come in and, as you say, Jeff, and just make that one change.
I think Diane Patterson's most vocal about that on other podcasts. I love listening when Diane's on because it's very straightforward, and she pretty much has the mentality of the government isn't going to look after me, I'm going to have to do it myself, and I think that's a good way of looking at it. Well, a quick stat from me, gents, 18% of the population of the UK are over 65. I was quite surprised in that number, and as we've mentioned, the average age of expectancy of life is increasing. But what should people be doing, when they're reaching, say, 55, 60 years old, they're going into retirement? At that point, what should they be looking to do? So let's say they've built up over the years, they've got their pension pot. What should they be doing next? Do they need to retire? Do they need to stop working? Or, there's always that part-time job at B&Q that people normally explain that's where they're going to go next. But what are your thoughts of, let's say you're at the point of today's the day I retire.
Mhm.
What should people be thinking at that point?
I think I'll be having that conversation with Jeff next year. So,
Yikes. That's very spicy.
sorry, Jeff.
I can't wait to see this
at least-
fight.
At least
I thought it was your grey hair.
probably.
I've aged dramatically
yeah.
this
It's
past
Jamie,
week.
it's Jamie retiring, that's
I
the
know,
thing. though.
probably. I think, Greg, I think it's important when you're sort of approaching that accumulation stage, because a lot of clients I speak to go, I don't want to retire, but actually generally have enough money. So it's all about balancing. When we do retirement planning with clients, we're balancing it. Well, actually, how much income do you require in retirement? How much expenditure you need? When is your state pension going to commence? And how can we facilitate that? And actually, by doing that, you start to speak to clients to say, you probably need to work another 2-3 years before you can afford what you want to do, or
Yeah.
you might be able to say you can afford it now. And this is why I think it's important to speak to, because a lot of clients think, I've got to work till I'm 67. You
Mhm.
don't necessarily have to work till you're 67. The value of speaking to a financial planner, an advisor, and just actually having that discussion, and they may tell you, actually, you can't afford to retire. We've done that a number of times when
Mhm.
when we speak to clients, or they may tell you, actually, you can afford to retire. Or if you have a balance in your life, where you say if you reduce this or you downsize, because you can have that option. So I'm speaking to a client at the minute where his wife's slightly younger than him, he's retired, and one of the options is he's living in a bigger house. If he moves house, which he doesn't necessarily want to do, but he moves that house, moves to something slightly smaller, then actually his wife will be able to retire and fund that. So there's lots of options, but I'd always sort of start with, look at what expenditure you need and speak to a financial advisor,
Yeah.
and they'll be able to direct you and point you in the right place.
I'd second that. I'll give you an example. My mother, when she was getting to the point where she thought she could retire, she didn't necessarily want to. She didn't think she was able to. When you sit with the financial advisor, they sat and looked through absolutely everything that she'd been paying into her whole life. Was fortunate to have a defined benefit pension as well. Once you consolidate it and look at it as a big picture, the reality was she probably could have retired 5 years prior to that and still has a very comfortable lifestyle. I don't know what she would do, mind. She'd be trips around the house being very bored, but
Should be cleaning your house and stuff, Phil, and buying Amazon things.
I'd keep her busy. But yeah, until you need to use expertise. There's people in the market who are qualified financial advisors. Use them. That's their day job. They literally look at that exact scenario to try and help people have the best possible retirement that they can. Don't try and wing it, to use a term of phrase. Don't try and do it yourself, because there's some mistakes you can make if you get that wrong, and it's mistakes with taxation, etc., which is quite punitive if you get it wrong. So
It's probably the other side of that as well, is that we all have maybe pots of money in so many different places. It's keeping track of that. I think one of the things with having an auto enrolment is if people move around jobs, they tend to forget where a pot of money is sitting.
Is
Keep
it
your
9
records up
an
to
average
date.
of nine
Yeah.
nine separate pension pots
Yeah.
over a full career, which is
Yeah.
startling. And I think that's where technology comes into play as well, which is
Yeah.
being able to consolidate, see it all in one place, and be able to track where you are. And many podcasts previously we've talked about goals and
Yeah.
the like. I think wanting to retire, regardless of your age, it's got to start with a goal which can be monetary, but it can also be income, and it can also be an age.
Yeah.
It can be bringing all of them in line to say, well, you can retire earlier with less money, or you could retire later with a little bit more. And I think downsizing, Jamie, property downsizing, that's an interesting one, because not a lot of people take that into account until they get to the point and they almost see it as a negative. But actually, why are you living in a 5-bedroom home if it's yourself and your spouse? Where does that come into play in financial planning? Does it come into play more often than not in later life, or?
Yeah, it can. Sometimes you see clients when they retire, they downsize at that point, and then that brings in the sort of the income they need. But actually, downsizing can actually reduce your expenditure in terms of gas, electricity, etc. What you need. So it gives you an option. But I think there is other options in terms of using property, which I would 100% recommend that you speak to an expert at this if you're looking at things such as equity release and lifetime mortgages, etc., which can be useful for the right person And I think this is, once again, when you echo, if you feel like you want to use your property, which is probably your biggest asset, typically your biggest asset, then it's always worth having that consider, because that's the thing you live in. That's what you need to live in that for the rest of your life. So
Mhm.
consider it's vital that you speak to an expert looking at your options, because you could downsize and still not have enough money. Or actually, you might have enough money and not have to downsize,
Yeah.
which I think is why it's so important to speak to that
I suppose
expert.
it is the expert that's
Yeah.
important in all of this, because there's so many nuances to different decisions,
Correct.
and different decisions that have different implications. So, whilst it is really important, I think, that we do say that people take advice around those things,
Yeah.
because the ability to slip up and make a mistake is quite real.
And there's a lot of adverts on the telly at the minute for these types of products.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And as you said, if you make the wrong decision, there's kind of no going back on these
No,
things.
That's
I
it.
totally
You've
agree.
worked your whole life to
Yeah.
kind of set yourself up, and if you get it wrong, then you can't really
Yeah.
unspill that milk. Without trying to be too dour, which is in my nature, you should always have a contingency plan with your retirement and how to maintain your wealth in it. I've written down care costs here, so
Yeah.
God forbid something can happen later on in life and you can't stay at home. You've got to go into I was going to call it a facility, but that sounds very depressing.
Worse.
A care home,
Yes.
for want of a better phrase. They're not cheap, and
No, I
they're
think-
only going to get more expensive.
I think that's where we'll maybe go next, Phil. You've obviously read my notes across the table,
can
but
read
that's
upside down.
that's the next thing with retirement. Obviously, as we've talked about, it's not always just in the garden pruning the hedges and things. It sometimes can take a turn, and you're right. End of life care can be expensive, from all angles really, and I think it's something that needs to be baked into it. And again, it's Phil, you work with 800 advisors in your role as head of sales for True Potential Wealth Management. That's something your advisors are constantly speaking to clients about. It's not just all about you've made this much money this year and your in the funds Jeff runs. It's also about the what could happen next.
Yeah, there's
It's
a
what I
hybrid
think about.
approach you can take. It's in terms of saving money and put as much as you can aside to fund that, but you can also take cover or protection out to give you a payout in the event of. We don't necessarily touch on cover and protection too much, but I think that if you speak to an advisor, they will go through all of these options with you, because there's a good market for that. There's a sound reasoning to do both. Would be my counsel on that one.
Yeah, I think we don't talk a huge amount about protection here. You're right, Phil, in terms of life assurance, but there's a variety of products that can help people with inheritance tax problems. Where you can get covered by life assurance as well as care costs as well as obviously just generally covering for life assurance. So, kind of back to the point of speak to an expert. There's lots of products there that can help you and support you towards your retirement.
It's also about that being back and being prepared.
Yeah.
Considering all of the options that are out there, we don't want to have some of these difficult conversations, but at times you have to approach them if you are going to be prepared and think about the consequences of various different actions. So again, back to that concept of you take ownership for it.
Mhm.
There's an opportunity to do it. You don't have to wait till it's upon you. You can plan for these eventualities. If they come to bear, they do, but if they don't, then there's a slightly different outcome that's available as well.
No, as with all of these things, cover and contributions to retirement, the sooner you start and the sooner you engage with these products, you need to put less in.
Yeah.
So if you take cover out at a younger age, you're healthier. If you get a guaranteed premium, it'll cost you less. Whereas if you go and look for cover when you're 73, for example, it might not be that cheap.
So I
I
think
must get onto that.
Yeah.
it's not till next year, Jeff. It's not till next year.
Well,
For one of us to get the job.
I think if we move on to another passionate topic for us, certainly at this side of the table, is when somebody gets to retirement age, one of the first things they think about doing, maybe because they've read about it, maybe because they've got a bit of an understanding, is they take their tax-free cash. It's something we actually expected when pension freedoms came in, and we all sort of sat waiting by the computer for all of the requests to come in, and it didn't quite, and I think over the years it's certainly reduced. But for us, obviously, the advice we would always give is try and keep as much on the table, try and keep as much invested, take what you need, draw an income, but try not to just because it's there, you don't need to take it. And I think let's kick that one around for a couple of minutes, gents.
Well, I suppose the starting point for me around that is to Phil's earlier point around life expectancy. If you think we're going to 55, take it that lump sum, well, you've probably still got 26, 27 years on average that you need that pot to work for. So the sooner you you start to access it, the problem you get about that compounding and the return that you need. So I think that's an important point. You wind that back 25 years before somebody's at 30, well, you'd be telling them to invest for growth and the opportunity that's ahead. So it's about striking that right balance between the two. But I think leaving it there, letting compounding work for it, don't touch it.
Yeah.
It would be bad financial advice, wouldn't it, Jamie?
I think we've banged this drum quite a lot, but it's this common misconception that as soon as you turn retirement age, you take 25% out of your pension, and that, there's your spending money, and then either goes into drawdown or you buy an annuity, and it's just real sort of old style pension planning. I had a client who, it was about 5 years ago now that we initially started his retirement planning, and basically what we did is we set up his income, which was basically taking a percentage tax-free cash, percentage taking his income up to his annual allowance, to his allowances that he's allowed. So there's no tax to be paid for him. He's getting exactly the level of income he needs. And now we're at the point where his state pension's commencing, and we'll be reducing that even further for him. But it just shows a prime example of how you can use mixtures of tax-free cash and money out your pension taker's income, not pay any tax, but actually give you the required amount. And I think this is the key thing. Some people might have the idea of, I want to take 25%, take my son on holiday or daughter on holiday or whatever. I mean, that's fine, but you don't have to take 25%.
Yeah.
It's really, just bear that in mind, and it's always going to still be there. And I think this is key. A lot of clients we speak to now don't need the tax-free cash, and we just simply, as I said before, we just lined up correctly for them and partially. Once again, going back to that expert advice, this individual was actually just going to take his tax-free cash and say, well, I'll live for the next 4 years because I'll have the money in the bank. That's exactly what he was going to do. And from his perspective, he's like, well, I've paid no tax, I've earned this, it'll be me in bank, and I'll just draw from it over that period. And his pension's actually worth, so he's took, on average, I can't remember the exact amounts he's taken out, but it's about 15,000. And he's done that for 4 years, and he's actually got more money now than he started off with at the start, even with taking the drawdown. Yeah, so it just shows you the effect of that
it's back to that very point you made earlier of compounding. You take 25% out, the rate of return that you need to earn on that 75% that's left is materially higher than you had to earn prior to that, and that's the point that's really important in all of that conversation, that if you can compound at a sensible rate, you shouldn't need to touch that money.
Well, that keys into what happens after you've retired, which is invariably death. Again, without being too down, you want to try and preserve that pot as much as possible, because it's going to go to your loved ones, your family, and if you do use the other products, as we mentioned earlier, use them first and try and just take what you need, as Jamie's saying, from the pension, and just leave as much of that there as possible. And I know I'm not advocating that you sit there and eat, white bread and tomato soup every day to enjoy your retirement, but if you want to do that, that's fine.
Sounds like a good retirement.
It does. That's living, Greg. That's living. But there are ways and means you can do that. It's just about having a good, sensible look. And the thing to remember is, as you creep towards later life, you will statistically spend less money every year. So if you think, again, going back to averages, if you're 81, you're not necessarily going to a theme park every week to spend your money there, because you might not want to go to a theme park. You might have less expensive hobbies and pursuits, and your outgoings will diminish statistically as you go on as well. So that's something to remember as well, that if you take what you need at the start and keep going on that and run it to a sensible degree, you should preserve a good amount of wealth in your pension pot for when you meet your maker.
So I think we just look at the percentage of the portfolio. I know you can't put the compliance element in, you can't judge future results based on previous results, but if we look at the average yearly percentage of a balanced portfolio, Jeff,
it's around 7%.
7%. So just think, if you've got a £400 pot, you take £100,000 out over a 5 or 6 years period, that makes a big difference.
Yeah, very much so.
So just kind of think about that if you're thinking, actually, I'll just put it in my bank just in case I need it.
I think the other point to think about is, I'll take it out, I'll put it in the bank, but actually it's not going to earn anything at the minute.
No.
0.1% interest rates today. Even if we look out 3-4 years, it's difficult to see rates going back to 5, 6, 7%. So even then, with inflation at say 2%,
Mhm.
you're not actually doing anything with that capital. Yes, it's sitting there, I can go and get it, but you're not earning any real return on it, so it's actually diminishing in value. So it's not 25,000, it's actually less than that 25,000 over that period of time. So I think
Yeah.
that's again something that we need to think about and people need
Yeah.
to be aware of,
Yeah.
that there's an opportunity cost to having it readily accessible in the bank versus having it in product that's going to earn a real return.
And I think probably the end of retirement, taking morbid Phil's
It's very morbid.
Down-
today.
I'm just happy to play that
Is-
role
is-
when
is-
needed.
is-
You should have been on last week in
Right.
the Halloween special.
Yeah.
That's what I was just thinking. It was last week, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The spooky one.
It was the spooky one.
The whole purpose of planning, Jamie, obviously estate planning is very important as well, and we should probably finish the whole retirement piece at that point as well, which again kind of is where financial advice comes in. It's a case of making sure you've got all of the right preparations in as well for end of life at retirement as well.
The key, we talk about all your range of products. I think it's depending on obviously where you're situated in the country. You find that you've a lot of clients have been given an inheritance tax problem just because of the property that they sit in and the value that's gained over many years. I was looking, my auntie's just purchased a house recently, and we were looking at, I think it was the person that she bought it off in Bristol, it was worth 300,000, about 15, 16 years ago. It's now worth 850,000. So just by living in your home, you're potentially giving yourself an inheritance tax problem, and it's worth considering that. And this is why, kind of say I love pensions, because they're actually the tax advantages of them are very good. Up to lifetime allowance, it's exempt from inheritance tax, and that can be a really sort of vital thing when you want to make sure as much of your estate goes to your loved ones. And it's once again, it's speaking that expert to understand that, because actually you might think, well, I've built this pension up and that's where I should be taking my income from for retirement. Could be, as Phil was saying before, let's take it from my ISAs. Well, that it really depends, and I think this is where it's once again that the value of advice is definitely there, which you need at these points in your life. We're not saying you need advice all the time, but the point is there'll be certain points in your life where just taking that guidance, that advice from your financial advisor could be sort of vital in terms of delivering good results to your loved ones and others.
So any clients listening on the podcast, it's be prepared, get ready,
Yeah.
and where you need us, get in touch. We've got a team of advisors, Jamie, that you look after, who help clients through all these kind of things.
Well, obviously we work with the head office advice team. You've got your financial advisors with the Phil that looks at them. When you're considering these actions, you speak to your advisor. It's not just about ensuring that you part of the work is you getting your money to grow, which Jeff's did a good job of. But there's these points in life vital that you prepare for them. We might say prepare is definitely the right word.
Speak to a professional. It won't take a great deal of time for them to get everything tidied up for you, and then you can concentrate on the knocked out thing, which is actually living your life and having a good time. So there you go. I've turned it around.
Well
Yeah,
done.
thank you.
But one last quick statistic on pensions. I read a very, very dull and boring report last night, but a statistic that came out: the average pension pot size for the northeast of England.
Cool.
Oh, that'll be the northeast of England.
It's in the thousands, Phil.
Oh wow! Well, things
Just to
have
give you a bit-
gone.
I'm
Things
going
have
to
gone well.
say 172,000.
I'm going to say £103,000.
I'll go for about 180.
It was 33,000.
Wow!
33,000
Well, we
pounds
are,
was the
aren't we?
average
I suppose
pension pot
obviously
in the
the
UK with
age
obviously
demographic.
yeah, and another statistic in the same report was 17% of people in the UK are saving no money at all on a monthly basis. So that's almost as many people that are over that 65 bracket who are in a retirement position.
Which is
There's
probably the
almost
more
as many-
worrying statistic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
As we were talking earlier about the government support. Well, if
Yeah.
people aren't helping themselves and paying in, so
And
yeah,
I
just
suppose that's where there is that education gap
mm,
about explaining to people the importance of starting early. All of the things that we
Yeah.
were saying at the start, even if you put a little bit away, it makes a big difference.
yeah.
It just
over the
shows,
longer
with
term.
our conception of what we thought it would be, just shows you how important the need is for that
Yeah.
people to think about putting that little bit of money away very, very early.
Absolutely.
A lot of our listeners are investment clients anyway, and probably are already doing that, but it just, passing that on to to your family, your children, etc. When you're thinking about these sorts of savings and actually getting them starting as a, obviously I talk about like the junior ISA I've got for my little one, but actually I'm hoping by the time, probably what will happen is at 18 I'll just get the money and that'll be gone. But what I'm hoping is he'll learn from that.
He'll be down at the Catholic club, spending it all on cheap lager.
But we don't know the Catholic club in Burley was mentioned in Parliament yesterday, Greg.
As it should be, Jamie.
Really, you haven't mentioned it.
No, have I not told anybody?
No, you haven't.
Okay, well.
Also, why are you going to give an 18-year-old a lot of money in a lump sum? We're here to talk about financial planning, because I know exactly what will happen with that.
True.
It won't end well.
Well, gents, we'll finish on the usual weekend plans. Jamie, we all know you're going to be hiding under your bed tonight because you're scared of all the loud noises, aren't you?
Yes, I've got fireworks night is not the night for me. No, I probably will be in bed because my son's woke us up at 3 o'clock in the morning every night this week. So I think I'll probably have to have an early night.
Early night
God,
for you,
yeah.
innit?
I think I thought I was over that point now, but it obviously just comes in waves when he feels like he just wants to wake you up. But the problem is he thinks it's playtime at 2 in the morning, and he's
just keeping you on your toes.
I think so. But his mum definitely says it's not playtime with him. So
It'll be playtime at 2 in the morning when you give him all that money when he's 18.
probably Phil. Yeah,
Nice hot chocolate and an early night for you, Jamie.
I think so, Greg. Yeah,
Phil?
Bonfire, going to watch a local bonfire and an effigy of a
start a bonfire.
of a Catholic getting burnt, which
Okay.
is a great British tradition. Without being too religious, it doesn't make any sense. So no, that and a bit of fireworks and some fortified.
Just throw a Macam on instead.
We could
That
do
would be even better.
2
Red
for
and white
1.
shirt and in you go.
2 for 1.
Yeah.
Douse it in petrol and off we go. I'm getting a bit hateful now, so I'll
Yeah.
pass on to Jeff. Jeff, what do you do for the weekend?
So something very similar, but maybe just some fireworks with the boys, nothing else. And then some rugby. Good
Some
rugby on at the
rugby.
weekend.
Yeah, there is some rugby on the weekend, isn't there? I'll be watching that as well. I think
If you're up.
if I'm
If you're
up,
away.
yeah, I've got the. I was wondering if I could have multiple Amazon Prime televisions on, so I can watch
Same
multiple
time,
games. Yeah.
We've got that big TV now
I have,
on the wall,
yeah,
haven't we,
it's
Jamie,
took-
which is
Yeah, it took
worth sharing with our viewers.
Yeah, we've got obviously a television from the office move when they were doing everything, and it's took nearly 8 months to get up. So
It's because it's a 100-inch TV, isn't it? Is that right?
Had to reinforce the wall.
I got
It's as
it.
big as that big screen
It is.
behind us there.
I
So.
don't very often get told off from my wife for buying something or putting something, but I did get told off for this.
Well, the good news is now that you've got that television, you don't need to turn the heating on.
Yes.
Because the amount of heat that will generate alone will.
It is really,
Yeah.
it is
But
great.
at least you can have the rugby on there.
It's-
And
Well, yeah, it'll be perfect. Yeah, it's a bit crazy. It actually does fill the full wall. And I think my comment to my wife was, "Oh, don't worry, it's not that big." And then when it went up on Monday, which by the way, it's been sitting in the room for about 6 months, I think, so I was getting told off for that as well. When it went up on Monday, it was, "Oh, you're joking me." Well, I'm happy. So
Good.
That's the main thing.
as long as you're happy, Jamie. Well, thanks, gents, for helping us, navigate our way through retirement. I think for all of our viewers and listeners, I think the main message is act as soon as you can. If you're younger, get saving wherever you can, even if it's a little bit here and there. Don't be part of that 17% who aren't paying in. If you're in retirement, speak to an advisor where you need any form of guidance. So thank you for joining us today. As usual, please do subscribe and like, and thank you very much.
Subscribing to the True Potential YouTube channel is quick and easy. Simply go to the channel on your desktop or through the YouTube app on your phone and click the subscribe button. You can then press the notification bell symbol if you wish to be notified as and when new videos are released. Doing this is a great way to keep yourself updated with market developments and personal finance insights. Thank you to everyone who has subscribed, and we look forward to continuing to help you do more with your money.